My name is Oliver Orton. I'm working with IFC as the manager of our corporate governance program for Latin America and the Caribbean, based in Bogota, Colombia. Worldwide, it's an issue that's there's a constant balance that needs to be reached between the role of shareholders, and certainly in Western Europe and the US, there's been a greater push of shareholder activism. I think certainly within the listed company segment, especially in the economies which are perhaps more dispersed than in Mexico and the other countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, I would see it as a more positive trend. I think the risk comes, on the other hand, where the shareholders are pushing the management and the company to focus, as you say, on short-term goals to reach the next 3-month reporting cycle at the expense of longer-term strategy. And I think that pressure can have some of the negative effects that we've seen in companies around the world, where the CEO is really motivated by the next 3-month reporting cycle, and that somehow will take away some of the initiative away from management and the role of management, as well as the board, who are approving some of the strategies to be able to make longer-term strategic plans, which may come at short-term cost. And I think that that's relevant not only in Latin America, but I think it's a global issue. I think especially strong in the United States, to some degree also in Western Europe. And I think the pendulum swings backwards and forwards depending on the nature of the economy globally, as well as some of the scandals that arise that refocus the attention of the investor community.
In the financial sector, how is corporate governance worldwide nowadays? And then we'll come down to Mexico and Latin America.
I think, well, as you said, I think after the financial crisis, with the spotlight put in particular on the failings of some of the largest financial institutions in the world, I think the quality of corporate governance, I think, was shocking to many. And I think that one upside, if you like, and this has come out of many of the reports, was that there was a lack of seriousness at the level of board engagement, if you like. The compositions of the boards of directors were not necessarily in line, in many cases, with what good corporate governance practices would suggest for the role of the board and essentially the accountabilities and responsibilities of the board. I think that was especially the case in the financial institutions, and frankly speaking, I think it's still very much the case. I think during the financial crisis, there was some criticism of shareholders themselves, that they were not being as involved or asking the right questions of their boards of directors. They were not holding them sufficiently accountable for their decisions. And again, so I think it's back to this pendulum as to what is the role of shareholders, in particular institutional investors, within corporate governance. I think one area that was very much highlighted globally was compensation issues at the level of board and especially senior management. That has come very much into the spotlight. In my own country, in the UK, there's been a lot of resistance and pushback, as well as in the United States, to, for example, capping compensation on CEOs. Now, various rules and practices have come in that are seeking to still be able to reward CEOs who perform very well, but not to reward CEOs that are not doing so well. So in some jurisdictions, we're seeing clawbacks of some of the benefits or the bonuses that have been received. I think it's too early to say how effective that's going to be, or what the impact will be in terms of improving the behavior and corporate performance of senior executives.
The financial sector is greedy; it's part of its DNA.
Yes.
So, what is the role of corporate governance? Trying to keep that greed under control, or simply to set some limits to the amount of greed that it's healthy for the market?
That's going to be a very personal response, I suppose, on my side. I suppose my view would be that corporate governance is about really aligning interests, setting processes in place. It's not to say that I don't see the role of corporate governance as with an end objective of limiting greed. I mean, I think to some extent, and as I say, this is a personal view, it's not IFC's view particularly, it's very much a personal view. I think that where there is a lack of alignment, for example, between the longer term interests of a business and the interests of those senior executives, that's where I think the problems occur. So I think corporate governance is not about limiting greed. I think that's for policymakers, regulation to that degree. But I think what corporate governance does is ensure that directors and senior executives are very much aware of their roles and responsibilities, that their interests are aligned with the longer term interests of the business, that people are rewarded in line with their performance, in line with the strategy adopted by the board of directors, and if the management is essentially successfully implementing this medium and longer term strategy set out, and the shareholders are, especially the institutional investors, are fulfilling their side of the bargain and putting the pressure in the right places, then I think what corporate governance serves to do is to realign those interests, which I think should have the end consequence of, I don't want to say here reducing greed, but of ensuring that there's an alignment between compensation practices and the interests of the business, and that the compensation practices in particular are not misaligned at the expense, and ultimately at the expense of the business. Corporate social responsibility as a distinct business area, if you like, from corporate governance. And in many cases they are confused, or one is seen as a subset of the other. To my mind, corporate social responsibility is, as I say, a separate discipline from what corporate governance implies. However, I think corporate social responsibility needs to be part of the strategic plan of a business, and in many cases that's not the case. Often corporate social responsibility and some very worthy projects undertaken by companies is often seen as divorced from the mainstream business, if you like, of a company. And I think that's not really the right way to focus on corporate social responsibility. I think it should be part of the strategy, developed again by management through an iterative process with the board of directors, in a holistic way. And I think boards and companies and shareholders should ask for this, should look at corporate social responsibility in the way that they approach all other strategic areas of their business, so that they are consistent, in line with the values of the company, and ultimately it should be monitored. In other words, just like other areas of strategy that a business adopts.